Alrighty, welcome back, Teal Nation. My name is Caden Lang, and this is our first ever episode of the Teal Talk. And today, with me, I have the voice of the Seahawks, Mike Vaccaro. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great, Caden. Hope you're doing well.
Thank you. So I realize you've been announcing the Seahawks for 17 years now. As long as I can remember, when turning on the radio, it's always been your voice for the basketball games. What kind of started your journey to becoming a broadcaster?
Well, I just grew up around sports, either playing it or watching sports. I knew at some point I wasn't going to play it professionally and wanted to still be around it. And broadcasting was that for me. Grew up, again, watching a lot of TV, sports, watching a lot of college basketball, the NCAA Tournament, which is, starting this week, and just loved it. So I think that kind of started my love for it. I knew I wanted to do something in broadcasting. Ended up going to Syracuse University, which has put out a number of big name broadcasters, and went there and had a couple of classes that were geared towards sports broadcasting, and one specifically that was calling basketball games and football games and stuff like that for the class, and just fell in love with calling games and being at live events. So I knew right then and there that was kind of the direction that I was going to lean in once I graduated. And I've been lucky to be the voice of a couple of schools, Campbell University for 6 years, and now, as you said, 17 years here at UNCW. So it's been great. I've been on the sidelines for a lot of great games, basketball-wise, baseball, other sports as well, and it's been a lot of fun.
So I know you said you went to Syracuse University, and they have produced a lot of great voice talent out there. Was there any role models during school that you looked up to or tried to model your broadcasting career after?
Yeah, I was always a big Bob Costas fan growing up. Just loved the way he did sports, but then he did other things as well. He had a TV show where he interviewed a lot of people, not just sports figures, and I just love the way that he was very knowledgeable, very prepared, and could have a conversation with anybody, whether it was a politician, like I said, a sports star, or somebody else. Interviewing is a tough skill, and he did it with ease. So once I knew that he went to Syracuse, I did some research, and Marv Albert, Sean McDonough, so many guys have gone to Syracuse. Some of the current guys, Jason Benetti, Dave Pash, guys that I look up to. Ian Eagle is somebody else as well. So once I kind of honed in on sports broadcasting and then did some research on Syracuse, I knew that was the place I had to be. And it was great, a great, learning ground and great to see how you're supposed to do things. So, now you see all these guys on TV and reach out to some of them and do some networking, and to think that I'm kind of among those alums is outstanding. And I couldn't be prouder to be a Syracuse alum.
Yeah, for sure. And broadcasting is a very hard market to get into. Was there a specific moment or class that you took that kind of a collective, wow, I can really do this?
Yeah, I think just the elective that I had doing sports broadcasting kind of taught me that. The summer before, I interned at a TV station in Syracuse. The sports director was Dave Ryan, who's now on CBS Sportsnet. He was my professor for that elective class as well, and just taught me a lot, and taught me that I could do this, that I could, sound like I'm supposed to sound to be a broadcaster. Now, I didn't sound like I do now when I first graduated, obviously, and it's been hours and hours and hours and doing a lot of games to really hone your voice and to learn what you should sound like during a broadcast, and the pace of a basketball broadcast compared to the pace of a baseball broadcast. But definitely, Dave Ryan, like I said, was a big influence on me as a guy that I interned for, and also, as an adjunct professor to me with that class as well.
So you moved on from Syracuse, ended up at Campbell. How did you end up at UNCW? Was that something that you've always wanted to do, or did it just kind of come up?
Well, I was at Campbell for 6 years, and Campbell and UNCW always play each other in so many sports, and obviously in basketball and baseball as well. So I knew people at UNCW and built that relationship with them. And it just so happened that Sam Gore, who was the voice before me, now is on ESPN, does a lot of tennis and some other sports as well. He was kind of moving on to that role. He couldn't dedicate the time to be the voice of the Seahawks anymore. He was making that transition to TV. So I knew this job was coming up, and some people who knew me from my days at Campbell kind of thought that I could be a good fit. I had lived in Wilmington before that, working in local media, in radio and TV. So I'd been down here and been a little bit associated with UNCW before I went to Campbell University. And I always said if there was a place I was going to go next to stay down this area, UNCW would definitely be it. Just obviously love Wilmington and love UNCW and this campus and everything that it has to offer. You know, my days while I was at Campbell, UNCW was having great success. Their first appearances in the NCAA tournament on the men's basketball side. And I would look at the scores and every game was close. Every game came down to the final possession. Every game was, close to going in overtime. And I was kind of jealous knowing that, Sam was calling such these great games and exciting games and just wanted to be a part of that. So again, when that opportunity came up, I certainly jumped at it and lucky enough that they decided I was a good fit to take over for Sam. And it's been 17 years and it's been great. I wouldn't give it up for anything.
Right. So 17 years is a long time. So you've seen a bunch of teams and a bunch of players. Has there been one team over the years that's jumped out at you as this is something special, or do you have a favorite team that you called over the years?
Well, on the basketball side, it's definitely the first championship team that I had a chance to call for, and that was 2006. Brad Brownell, now at Clemson, was the coach of the time. John Goldsberry was, a key figure on that team, the point guard, and now has his jersey retired and is in the Hall of Fame. So 2006 was great, able to call that championship game, the Richmond Coliseum, and then go on to the NCAA tournament for the first time. Again, I grew up watching the NCAA basketball tournament, religiously, as everybody does this time of year, and to be able to be part of it was great. We played George Washington and came down to an overtime where we just came up short. Had we won that game, we would have played Duke in the next round, which would have been amazing. But still, that experience of going to the tournament for the first time, and for me, it's rubbing elbows with the other radio announcers, with the TV guys. I mean, was the biggest thrill for me to kind of be one of those guys for the first time. So that team was definitely special on the basketball side. And on the baseball side, there's been so many teams. I mean, actually that same year they won the CA championship on the baseball side, and we went to a regional as well. So that was a special year, 2006, where I had a chance to call not just a basketball but a baseball championship and go to an NCAA regional with the baseball team as well. And as a broadcaster, number one, to be able to call a championship game, and then two, when it's a win, it's great because you're going to the NCAA tournament, and then to go to an NCAA tournament is outstanding and just a lot of fun to be in that atmosphere and that environment. So 2006, which was just my second year, was definitely a high water mark in my career for sure.
Did you start out doing basketball and baseball, or did you start with one and then gradually moved on to other sports?
I kind of did a little bit of everything, especially at Campbell. I did basketball, I did baseball, I did women's basketball, did some softball broadcasts and did some softball here for a little bit as well. So it was kind of a little bit of everything. Now I kind of stick with just basketball and baseball. Some other folks call some of the other sports because we do as much as we can on the Seahawk Digital Network. So there's other folks that are doing that kind of as a part-time basis, doing soccer and softball and volleyball. I don't know those sports that well to broadcast them, to be honest with you. So I try to stick with what I know. And right now I think that's basketball and baseball, and they pair well together just because of the timing of both. There's some crossover, but typically once basketball is done, I turn my attention to baseball and start working with those guys. So this past weekend was my first three broadcasts for baseball, and had a chance to call those 3 wins against App State. So it's a good partnership doing one and the other at the same time like that.
Do you have a preference over which one you call?
Like I said, I grew up more a basketball guy than baseball. I've learned a lot calling baseball games through the years. When I started out, I didn't know the game like I do now. I could watch baseball game, obviously, but to call a baseball game, you have to know the sport. And even when you know it, something's going to happen in a game that maybe you've never seen before. So you've got to know what you're talking about, try your best to know what the rules are. But definitely basketball was a sport that I played more often growing up and would watch greater I've been growing up. So I don't know if you would say it's my favorite sport. It's maybe my more knowledgeable sport, but probably at this point in my career, I've done more baseball broadcasts than anything else, and have learned a lot during 23 years of calling baseball games. I've definitely improved from my first broadcast to what I've done this past week, and I know a whole lot more about baseball than I ever did before.
So 23 seasons to cover baseball is a long time. What are some of your favorite players that you've seen play in the diamond?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously right now, Ryan Jeffers is one of those guys, a more recent player, but just debuted last year in Major League Baseball with the Twins as a rookie catcher. And it looks like he's going to stick with them this year as well. He was a guy that I remember, his first year, he didn't play a whole lot. And then after that, his sophomore year, I think he started to play and he started to hit the ball, and you couldn't get him out of the lineup. They found a place for him wherever they could. And it was going to be in the outfield. It was going to be behind the plate, and he developed into, such a great player for UNCW. John Rayner, going back a number of years, was an outstanding player, center fielder for UNCW, who I thought, defensively just glided out in the outfield and was so fun to watch out there, and could hit the baseball as well. Stephen Linkus, who's a local guy from Leland, who was an outfielder for UNCW the same way, a lot of speed for him. And these were guys that were on, tournament winning teams, CA championship teams that went on to NCAA regionals. And they were great players. Chris Hatcher, who was on that 2006 team, he was a catcher, and he went to Major League Baseball, came up with the Marlins as a catcher, and then switched to becoming a pitcher and had a decent career as a pitcher in Major League Baseball, spending a number of years with the Dodgers, some playoff appearances for him, I think finishing his career with the Oakland A's. So baseball is a program, I think, that is, has had great success here, and maybe underappreciated sometimes by some folks, because it's continued to put out great talent. Currently there's 7 former baseball players that are in spring training Major League Baseball camps, which is a huge number for a school like this, and the talent level that they bring in here is outstanding. So there's been so many good players. On the pitching side, Matt Batts was a 2-time pitcher of the year, was outstanding. Just so many players, and probably too many to name all of them, but so many that it's been a privilege to call their games, that have not only been great players, but great ambassadors for this program, and just great student athletes, which is great to see, that they recruit student athletes here, and you have these guys that play well, great athletes, but they're great in the classroom and great people as well.
Is there a favorite game, either basketball or baseball, over your career that's like stood out as like your favorite game you've ever called?
Maybe baseball. I think it was 2008. It was a regional that North Carolina hosted in Cary, because their ballpark, Boschmer Stadium, was being renovated. And we played Elon. It was before Elon joined the CAA, so it was they were a non-conference opponent. We always played them during the year a couple of times, and this was a game we were down in the 9th inning, and we ended up scoring 11 runs. Came back and won that game to eliminate them and move on to play North Carolina in a regional. So from a baseball standpoint, that was huge. And it was a similar type of game just a couple of years ago in the Greenville regional. We played East Carolina, and down 5-0, had a 5-hour rain delay. We scored 9 runs in the 5th inning and ended up holding on to win that game 9-7. So those games that have a little strange turnouts, it seems like, since I've been here, rain delays in baseball have been tremendous. They've been trailing in those rain delays, or before that, and they have the rain delay and they come out, and it's been a different team, and they provide some exciting games. So, but that Elon game and those 11 runs that we scored, that was definitely huge to see that comeback unfold when we thought that game was over, and there was no quitting that team that year. That was a really good team in 2008.
So tonight, UNCW plays ECU. They're kind of our non-conference rivals. There's a lot of kind of not hatred, but definitely animosity between the teams. Are there certain teams that UNCW plays that you just really root for the other team to lose, or UNCW to win? Does it feel better when that happens?
East Carolina is probably one of those. The older alums know them as a conference rival, which made this, that much better of a series when they were in the conference at the time. But even with them not playing in the CAA anymore, it's still a rivalry, especially from the older fan base. But I'm sure from the current students, you probably have friends that go to East Carolina. So, you could have that trash talking after those games or before those games leading into it. So East Carolina has definitely been a rival for a lot of our sports. Since they've come into the league, Charleston's been a big rival as well. You've kind of have that the North Carolina school, the South Carolina school, two schools very similar without football that have a lot of the same sports and, obviously conference opponents. So they're playing everybody in every sport as well. So Charleston has really developed into a nice rivalry, I think, for UNCW. At one point, I think when I started, it was almost like every sport had a different rival within the league. But now with Charleston, it's kind of across the board that's become the rival for all the sports. So, I enjoy when we play those games, especially the sports that I call. It definitely, adds a little something to it when you have these two schools. It's, kind of a smaller scale Duke and North Carolina, if you will, UNCW and Charleston, just because, like I said, the programs are so similar. For the athletic departments, the cities are very similar as well. So that's made for a very good rivalry here last several years with them in the conference.
So shifting back to basketball, UNCW has had kind of a rough go around this season. And with all their roster changes happening, I believe there's only 3 or 4 active players on that roster. What are your thoughts on this roster turnover?
Yeah, I think it happens everywhere these days. I was looking at the transfer portal myself the other day, and one school has 8 players in there. I think the NCAA has made it a little easier for students to transfer and try to find a good fit for them if it's not where they're currently at. And I think that's part of it as well. And then for a place like UNCW, you're working to build a program and you have to increase talent and get everybody on the same page. Some of the kids that are transferring weren't brought in by this coaching staff. So maybe they're not seeing eye to eye. I don't know that personally, but so maybe the players think that there's a better fit out there than what this is. I think the ones that are here are a good nucleus, but obviously you're bringing in 7, maybe 8 players in a year, which is tough. It's tough for the coaching staff to find that, those players that are going to mix with the current players and everybody be happy. And it's not to say everybody will be happy once they are here, but if you bring in the right kids and you bring in kids that the talent level increases and your depth increases, you're going to win games, and that helps everybody be happy. So I think it was a tough year for everybody in college basketball. To get to the point where you're playing an NCAA tournament is tremendous, because early on it didn't seem like it was going to get there. But for UNCW specifically, it was a great year. November, December, they were 6-3 heading into the Christmas break, and then coming out of there, they had their first pause, and that kind of derailed them a little bit. They weren't winning games in the conference, but they were in every game. The losses in the conference were by an average of 5 points, during the regular season. And then they had another pause. So, 2 27-day pauses. That's 54 days, that you're not together as a team and not getting ready and don't have that rhythm to your season as well. And I think that was probably the most difficult thing. I think the coaches and the players would talk about is just not having that rhythm. You just didn't know when you were going to play again. You didn't know probably when you were going to practice again, when you were going to see your teammates and your friends again. So it was definitely tough. It's definitely a unique season. I think, like I said, for all of college basketball, I think whoever wins the national championship is definitely going to earn it and deserve it to survive a year like this and do what you had to do to continue to play. But I think UNCW will be back. I think, again, the opportunity is there for them to bring in some talent, bring in some depth, and depth is going to be a key, because they want to play fast. They want to press, they want to run. And with injuries and other guys that left the team during the season, that made it difficult as well this year for UNCW. They just couldn't be the team that I think Takeo Siddle envisions them being, definitely what this program was when he was here as an assistant coach. So I think once that talent is brought in, they'll be able to have that vision match up and have that, reality be the vision that he has for this program, which is, running, pressing, scoring a lot of points and winning championships. Being here before when it happened back-to-back years, he's a guy who knows about this level. And this level is different than a Power 5 level. You don't have all the advantages. You don't have the biggest budgets. You've got to make do with what you have. You got to do more with less. And he knows that. He's been here before, and I think that's a big plus to have a guy in that seat as the head coach who's been here, been on this level, and won at this level as well. He knows what it takes.
So I know you mentioned the NCAA tournament a few sentences ago. What does your bracket look like this year? Who do you have winning it all?
I haven't filled one out just yet. I typically do just to, bragging rights in my house with my wife and my son as well. It's hard to say that Gonzaga is not going to win it. In my mind, COVID's the only thing that can beat Gonzaga right now. You look at them averaging something like 92 points a game. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous number to throw out there. So many teams struggle to score points and struggle to stop them. I've seen them a handful of times, saw them earlier this year when they made Virginia look silly, a team that is known for defense and known to shut down teams. And they ran all over them. I think scored close to 100 points, if not over 100 points in that game. So Gonzaga's got to be the top pick. And probably, that some of the top teams, the top C's probably have the best shot. They went through a year and were able to maintain what they were doing and continue to win games. So you've got to think that they have enough, experience and enough rhythm to what they're doing to stay there. But definitely Gonzaga's got to be the pick right now. I would be very shocked if they didn't win it, but it is a tournament and anything can happen. With no fans, really, it changes the dynamic a little bit. There were no in college basketball. There were no home court advantages this year. I think around 60% of home teams won games this year, which is a lot lower than what it typically is. So that could be one thing that maybe throws things off a little bit. But I definitely think Gonzaga is going to be the ones cutting it down the net, and it should be exciting. It should be a fun couple of weeks of basketball, hopefully. Do
you have any dark horse teams in the tournament?
Well, I'm a Syracuse grad and a Syracuse fan as well. So I'd like to see them, when people have doubted them in the past and when they've been a low seed in the past, they found a way to get into the Final Four and make something happen. And I think with them, playing that 2-3 zone defense in the ACC, the opponents see that every year. So I think they can adjust to it. But in a tournament setting like this, where you don't have a whole lot of time to prepare for that, and maybe you don't see a 2-3 zone defense with the length that Syracuse has, I think that's why they've been able to be successful in the NCAA tournament when they haven't had maybe the biggest or best teams, and they've been able to just get in. So they could be a dark horse if they can, get past the first game, which is San Diego State on Friday, and that's going to be tough. And if they win that, most likely it's West Virginia in the next round. So for them to get to the Sweet 16, it will be tough, but I would love to see them be a dark horse in this tournament this year.
I mean, anything can happen. I have Colgate making it to the Sweet 16. So
exactly. I mean, this is the year I think where, I wouldn't be surprised if more lower seeds won, just because it's so hard to gauge how good some of these teams are. They just haven't played a full schedule. They haven't played, a lot of non-conference games like UNCW as well. So it's hard to gauge and to look at how good these teams are. So it'll be interesting to see, how much film is there out there of each of the teams and how much can you prepare for the next opponent. So I think there'll be a lot of upsets this year.
So switching gears a little bit, do you have any professional teams that you just absolutely love, like just an absolute fanatic for professional teams of any sport?
Yeah, I'm a big Seattle Seahawks fan. That's probably the biggest. I'm a Seahawks and a Dodgers fan, and I've been both of those for a long time, not just recently. So it's been a lot of bad years as a fan, but definitely Seattle. I kind of live and die with watching Seahawks games. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and back in the early 80s, was a big Penn State fan, and their running back, Kurt Warner, was drafted by Seattle, and that got me to start watching them back in 1983. So I've been a Seattle fan, since then, like I said, a lot of losing seasons, and now to see them be successful, obviously win a Super Bowl, be so close to winning back-to-back Super Bowls, and now seeing the drama play out with Russell Wilson, that's a little crazy. But and people, I have a Seattle Seahawks license plate on my car, and people say, "Well, you're going a little too far. You're the voice of the UNCW Seahawks. You don't have to like all the Seahawks." And I'm like, "No, I really do like the Seattle Seahawks." Been lucky enough that they played the Panthers for a couple of years and have had a chance to see them through the years. So that's nice. I've never been out to Seattle. Would love to eventually do that. But definitely the Seattle Seahawks are a team that, like I said, I live and die. That, some days are tough if they lose, but when they win, it's great to come into work the next day and have a smile on my face.
Would you ever consider calling football games? I know UCW doesn't have a team, but say you have obviously one team you could pick anywhere. I'm assuming you would pick the Seahawks, but how would you like to call football games?
I would love to. That's one sport I haven't had the opportunity to call. I've done some stuff, kind of practice games, calling some games, but nothing officially over the air. Just because it's, the stops I've made haven't had football, But when I was at Syracuse, I was actually a manager for the student manager with the football team for 4 years, and had a chance to be around them and go to a couple bowl games. So, I know the sport. I think I could broadcast the sport. It's probably somewhere in between basketball and baseball as far as the speed and then what it would take prep wise. So I think I could do it. So I would love to do it. I mean, eventually if we ever got football here, I don't think that's on the horizon, but if that happened, that would be great to be the voice of the Seahawks, the UNCW Seahawks. But yeah, if I have one game to call, I don't know if I could keep my emotions in check though, calling a Seattle Seahawks football game. I don't know. My emotions might get away from me doing that, but it would definitely be fun to be able to call some football games at some point in my career. If it happens, that'd be great. If not, then it's just not meant to be.
All right, Mike. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it, and hopefully UNCW baseball team will end up being the CAA champions this year. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. They're picked to win it, so hopefully they have a good season once again. And I appreciate you having me, Cade.
Thanks again.